Pay close attention to Marisela Botello Valadez, 23 years old, Seattle, Washington, a daughter and an older sister who had flown to Dallas, Texas for a long weekend. She had plans. She had a flight home booked for the morning of October 5th, 2020. She never made it to the gate. When the boarding announcement was called at Dallas Love Field that morning, her seat sat empty. The plane pushed back without her. Back in Washington, her family waited for a call that never came. What happened to Marisela Botello Valadez in the early hours of October 5th took place inside a house in Mesquite, Texas, and it involved three people whose relationship with each other was unlike almost anything investigators had encountered before. One of them brought her home. One of them was already waiting. And one of them would spend the next 3 years trying to make sure no one ever found out what happened inside that bedroom. Marisela Botello Valadez was born and raised in the Seattle area of Washington state. She was the oldest child in a close-knit family that included her younger brother, Luis Botello Valadez, and her parents, who by every public account maintained a tight and devoted relationship with both of their children. Her aunt, Denaisley Castillo, who became the family's most visible spokesperson throughout the investigation and trial, described Marisela consistently as someone who was deeply embedded in her family's life. Not just present at gatherings, but central to them. The kind of person who showed up, who checked in, who made her presence felt. By the time she was 23, Marisela was, by all accounts, building her life. She was not someone who went dark on her family. She was not someone who missed flights without explanation. She was not someone who disappeared. In early October of 2020, Marisela flew from Seattle to Dallas to spend a few days with Raul Ortiz, a man she had been involved with in the past. The two had history. By this point, their relationship had settled into something casual and friendly. The trip was social. She arrived on October 2nd, spent several days in the city, and had a Southwest Airlines return flight booked for the morning of October 5th. On the evening of October 4th, Raul Ortiz told investigators he had gone out, returned to his apartment intoxicated, and misplaced his apartment keys. He passed out in the hallway outside his own front door, waiting for his roommate to arrive and let him in. Marisela, locked out of the apartment with no way inside and no reason to stand on a doorstep all night, made a decision that was, by any reasonable measure, sensible. Around 1 in the morning, she opened a rideshare app and ordered a car. She went back out into the city. That choice, made in the middle of an ordinary night in a city she did not live in, set every other event of this case in motion. It is worth pausing on that for a moment. Not to assign responsibility where none belongs, but because the randomness of it matters. Marisela was not doing anything unusual. She was not taking a risk she had been warned about. She was a young woman in a city at 1 in the morning, locked out of a friend's place, making the most logical available decision. There was nothing in that moment that could have told her what was waiting. Her family in Washington would not know she was missing until her flight landed without her. Her brother Luis told investigators she would never simply go dark. Not a call ignored, not a text left on read. When the calls started going straight to voicemail and the messages sat unread for hours, then a full day, the family's concern sharpened quickly into something much harder to sit with. They reported her missing. And from that point forward, the investigation moved in one direction. Deep Ellum sits just east of downtown Dallas. It is one of the city's most active nightlife districts, a stretch of bars, live music venues, and late-night crowds that stays in full motion well past midnight. The rideshare dropped Marisela there alone. 1 in the morning. An unfamiliar city. She was navigating on her own that a security camera mounted to the rear exterior wall of a venue called Punk Society, angled outward over a large parking lot, captured what happened next. In the footage, Marisela can be seen walking alongside an unidentified man. A second camera positioned farther back shows the two of them moving together toward a parked vehicle. That vehicle was a 2014 black Audi A3. Marisela got in. Approximately 40 minutes later, that same black Audi pulled into the parking lot of the 7-Eleven convenience store in the area. Internal security cameras captured Marisela walking through the front door. She moved toward the coolers at the back of the store. She selected a drink. She approached the counter, and she smiled at the camera. She was not restrained. She was not showing distress. She was not looking toward the exit or signaling in any way that she was in danger. From every visible indicator available to investigators reviewing that footage, Marisela Botello Valadez was with this man by choice. She appeared comfortable. She appeared relaxed. That image would become one of the last confirmed photographs of her alive. For investigators, the 7-Eleven footage answered one immediate question and opened a much more important one. She had not been taken from that parking lot. She had not been forced into the car. Whatever happened to Marisela in the hours that followed, she had walked into it without warning. The danger she was heading toward was invisible. The IT was already inside the house. If you're watching this for the first time, subscribe to Margaret Footages before this video ends. Every week on this channel, we cover cases with this level of detail, cases the news cycle moves past too quickly. Hit the subscribe button. You will not regret it. Let's get back to the story. License plate readers positioned at multiple points across the Dallas road network had captured the Audi's registration. When investigators ran that plate, matched the registration to a driver's license photograph, and compared it against the man visible on the 7-Eleven security footage, the identification was immediate and unambiguous. Charles Anthony Beltran, 31 years old, known by the nickname Chuck. Chuck worked the front door of a nightclub in the Deep Ellum area, not far from where he had crossed paths with Marisela that night. He was also an aspiring rapper. He had previously registered a business called Math Class, which was linked to his music career. He had a prior criminal conviction for aggravated robbery involving an unloaded firearm, for which he had served approximately 2.5 years. The original offense had involved pistol whipping a man and stealing his wallet. A man with a documented history of violence, now working security at a bar, driving a black Audi that someone else had bought for him. That detail, that the Audi was not his, would become significant quickly. Investigators cross-referenced Marisela's cell phone GPS data against Chuck's known residential address. The last recorded ping from her device corresponded exactly with a house in Mesquite, Texas, located approximately 20 minutes from Deep Ellum by car. That address was registered to the same Audi. It was the house Chuck shared with 2 other people. Her phone signal stopped at that address. It never moved again. At this point in the investigation, days had already passed since Marisela failed to board her flight. No credit or debit card activity. No response to calls or messages from her family. Her parents and her brother Luis had been in contact with Dallas police, insisting that this was not Marisela's behavior. She would not go dark. She would not fail to call. Something was wrong. Police upgraded the investigation. They needed to understand who lived in that house in Mesquite. What they found when they started pulling records was a domestic arrangement that took considerable time to fully map. The leaseholder of the Mesquite property was a woman named Lisa Dykes, 56 years old at the time of the murder. She had worked as a paralegal in litigation and negotiation for over 30 years. She had been married 3 times before and had 3 adult children, including her youngest, a 20-year-old named Chelsea. By external measures, Lisa had been a stable and functional professional for most of her adult life. People who had worked alongside her at the law firm where she was employed described her as competent and consistent. Her longtime hairdresser had known her for years. And then, at some point, something shifted. Lisa had met Chuck Beltran through a bar managed by the son of that same hairdresser. The introduction was casual. What followed was not. According to colleagues at her law firm, her hairdresser, and others who had known her for years, the change that came over Lisa after meeting Chuck was described by virtually everyone who witnessed it the same way. Total, unmistakable, and entirely oriented around one person. She got tattoos covering her arms and torso. She cut her hair short and dyed it a series of bright colors, eventually settling on platinum and then pink. She lost approximately 60 pounds. She underwent a lower facelift and a thigh-plasty procedure to reshape her chin and legs. The surgical procedures were later confirmed through court testimony, with evidence presented that Nina Morano had paid for at least one of those surgeries. People who had known Lisa for decades said they barely recognized her. They said, without exception, that all of it had been done to please Chuck, to become what she believed a 31-year-old bouncer and aspiring rapper wanted her to be. The financial dimension of Lisa's involvement with Chuck was equally documented. She purchased the 2014 black Audi A3 outright and gave it to him. She registered the business math class in his name. She funded the production costs of his music videos, at least one of which was filmed in the driveway of the Mesquite house. She arranged his career infrastructure and paid for it. She also removed her youngest child, Chelsea, from the family home so that Chuck could move in. People who knew Lisa at the time described the arrangement bluntly. She was his financial backer and, in their view, his partner in everything but name. She was proud of the role. She made no attempt to conceal it from those around her. Then, in 2019, Lisa married her close friend, Nina Morano. Nina Morano was 48 years old, originally from Staten Island, New York. She had earned her law degree from the J. Reuben Clark Law School at Brigham Young University in 2010. She had worked in civil litigation, including a period at the Empire Law Group in Polk County, Florida. She was a widow. Her late husband had left her a significant inheritance. She maintained a second property in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, and by all professional measures, she had built a successful independent career. She and Lisa had been close friends for years before their marriage. After the wedding, Nina relocated from the East Coast to the house in Mesquite. The two women did not take each other's surnames at the wedding. They both took Chuck's. They became, legally, Lisa Beltran and Nina Beltran. That detail was not incidental. It was documented. It was voluntary. Both women had chosen, as a deliberate legal act, to attach their identities to his. So inside that house in Mesquite, on the night Marisela Botello Valadez GPS signal went silent, were three people. Chuck Beltran, 31, convicted felon, nightclub bouncer, aspiring rapper. Lisa Beltran, 56, paralegal, who had rebuilt her body, her finances, and her identity around him. And Nina Beltran, 48, attorney, widow, who had moved across the country, married Lisa, and taken the same man's name. Cell phone data confirmed the location of all three devices at the Mesquite address in the early morning hours of October 5, 2020. The same hours during which Marisela's phone had gone silent inside those walls. What the full nature of the relationship between all three of them was, what the domestic reality of that household looked like from the inside, would not become fully clear until the trial. What is documented is this. Three people were in that house. One young woman entered it. By morning, that young woman was gone, and three people with capital murder warrants had fled across the country. On the afternoon of October 14, 2020, Special Agent Taylor Page from the Dallas FBI field office drove out to the Mesquite residence alongside uniformed officers and a county detective. 9 days had passed since Marisela was last seen alive. The house was dark. Nobody answered the door. Agent Page contacted the leaseholder by phone. Lisa Dykes answered. She told him she had not seen Chuck in weeks. She said she had no information about his whereabouts and no way of reaching him. When Agent Page asked her to clarify the nature of her relationship with Chuck Beltran, she declined to elaborate. She offered no further assistance and ended the call. That same afternoon, law enforcement obtained a search warrant and entered the property. What the investigative team found inside told a clear story, not through what was present, but through the condition in which everything had been left. Closet floors scattered with clothing and personal items. Trash left on the kitchen counters. Leftover food and cleaning supplies sitting out mid-task, as though the occupants had stopped what they were doing without any intention of returning. A mattress had been leaned against the wall in the front hallway. In the master bedroom, part of the ceiling had collapsed at some point, leaving a layer of insulation across the top of the furniture and the floor below. The house did not look abandoned in the usual sense. It looked like three people had made a sudden decision to leave and had not looked back. Investigators also documented a small shrine positioned inside the home. It was later identified as a figure associated with Santa Muerte, a folk religious icon rooted in certain strands of Mexican Catholic and spiritual tradition, representing the personification of death. The figure had been arranged deliberately, surrounded by offerings. It was photographed, logged, and documented. Defense attorneys would later argue the shrine belonged to Chuck Beltran and had no connection to Lisa or Nina. Prosecutors did not rely on it as central evidence, but its presence was part of the broader documented scene. Crime scene technicians then applied Blue Star luminescent reagent throughout the interior of the home. Blue Star is a chemical compound used by forensic investigators to detect the presence of blood even after a surface has been cleaned. When the compound contacts hemoglobin residue, it produces a visible luminescent reaction in darkened conditions in the guest bathroom. A small section of the door frame and an area inside the bathtub produced a positive reaction. The most significant findings were concentrated in the guest bedroom. The room later confirmed through the investigation to be the bedroom used by Chuck Beltran. Just below the window, a section of carpet had been visibly cleaned. The effort had been deliberate, but despite it, reddish-brown discoloration was still visible beneath the surface of the fibers. When Blue Star was applied to that section of carpet, it reacted. Forensic analysis of the carpet sample confirmed what investigators had already begun to suspect. The blood was Marisela Botello Valadez. The DNA match was conclusive. 2 additional blood profiles were recovered from the same area of carpet. One profile was consistent with a male contributor. One was consistent with a female contributor. Neither matched Marisela. Investigators assessed both profiles as potentially belonging to other occupants of the household. The defense would later point to these unidentified profiles as evidence that others beyond Lisa had been present in that room. By the time the forensic team completed its work at the Mesquite house, law enforcement had confirmed Marisela's blood at the scene, established through cell phone data that Lisa, Nina, and Chuck had all been at the address in the early morning hours of October 5th, and found a property that had been vacated in a hurry by people who had made no effort to make contact with police in the 9 days since a woman had gone missing from inside it. Capital murder arrest warrants were issued for all. All three were already gone. Cell phone records for Lisa and Nina from the night of October 4th into the early hours of October 5th showed both devices had traveled from the Mesquite house southward toward a community called Hutchins, Texas. The area was heavily wooded, cut through with waterways, and largely unpopulated in its outer stretches. Throughout November of 2020, law enforcement from multiple agencies conducted systematic ground searches of that terrain, guided by the cellular location data. They found nothing. On March 23, 2021, a person in the area near East Belt Line Road and Post Oak Road in Wilmer, Texas, approximately 15 miles south of Dallas, came across human remains while out tracking feral cats in the woods. They contacted authorities. The following day, the Dallas County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed the identity through dental records. The remains were those of Marisela Botello Valadez. Due to the length of time the remains had been exposed to the elements and to animal activity, the medical examiner was unable to establish a definitive cause of death from the recovered remains. What had been done to Marisela inside that bedroom would have to be proven through other means. Through forensic evidence. Through the accounts of the people who had been present. Through the testimony that would eventually be given under oath in a Dallas courtroom. For the Botello family, the confirmation of the remains brought its own particular weight. 5 months of uncertainty ended that day with the answer none of them had wanted. Denaisely Castillo, Marisela's aunt, told reporters that the family had never stopped hoping she would be found alive, and that the identification had broken something that could not be repaired. 2 days after the identification, on March 25th, law enforcement in Miami, Florida located and arrested Nina Morano. She and Lisa had been renting a property in the Miami area together following their departure from Texas. Lisa was not at the address when officers arrived. The investigation into the fugitive movements of all three individuals revealed that their preparations had begun almost immediately after Agent Page's phone call to Lisa back in October. Records showed that Lisa and Nina had contacted their Pennsylvania neighbor and realtor, Jamie Scarpia, to list Nina's property there on the market. The proceeds were believed intended to fund their flight. They also arranged for Chuck's Audi to be transported out of Texas to New York State. New York State police subsequently located and searched the vehicle. A strand of hair was recovered from the trunk and submitted for DNA analysis. Text messages recovered from the period when Lisa and Chuck were both fugitives painted a detailed picture of how Lisa was managing the situation. She wrote about needing money to switch vehicles. She referenced the capital murder warrants by name. She noted that an attorney had told her investigators were still building their case and did not yet have sufficient evidence against them. She expressed concern about Nina's ability to hold herself together under pressure. She made clear that speed was critical. These were not the messages of someone who believed she had done nothing wrong. They were the messages of someone running a calculated operation. On March 26, 2021, Lisa Dykes was located just outside Orlando, Florida. Officers took her into custody while she was on the phone with her attorney. On April 2, 2021, Charles Beltran was apprehended in West Jordan, Utah, where he had been staying with the family of an ex-girlfriend who was also the mother of one of his children. His arrest was executed by the United States Marshals North Texas Violent Fugitive Task Force in coordination with Dallas Police and West Jordan law enforcement. By May of 2021, all three were back in Texas. Lisa and Nina each posted $500,000 bonds and were released on house arrest with GPS ankle monitors. Chuck remained held on a matching bond. All three faced charges of capital murder that Marisela's aunt Denaisely Castillo made her position public. She told reporters the family had expected Lisa and Nina to run when they were given the chance. She said releasing them on bond had been a mistake. She said her family had not slept since October 5th. From May through December of 2021, Lisa Dykes and Nina Morano appeared to comply with the conditions of their release. 7 months of house arrest. 7 months of ankle monitors. 7 months during which the Pretrial Services Department of Dallas County had no documented cause for concern. At 7 in the morning on Christmas Day, 2021, both ankle monitors were disabled. From minutes apart, at the same location. The timing had not been chosen at random. Christmas morning was a calculated selection. Dallas County Pretrial Services operated with reduced holiday staffing. The two women had identified that window and used it. The disabled monitors were not flagged by the department until December 27th. By that point, Lisa and Nina had been gone for 2 full days. They had boarded an international flight. Their tickets were issued in their own legal names. Their route took them first to Seoul, South Korea, and then onward to Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia. Cambodian immigration officials confirmed to American law enforcement that the two women had entered the country. They had not left. The FBI field office in Dallas coordinated directly with Cambodian authorities and with the country's largest bank to trace the cash withdrawals being made by Lisa and Nina. ATM security camera footage from one of those withdrawal locations captured the license plate of the vehicle that had transported them to the machine. Local Cambodian officials traced that plate to a taxi driver, who was able to direct authorities to the address where 2 foreign women were staying. They were in Sihanoukville, a coastal city in southwestern Cambodia on the Gulf of Thailand. Lisa Dykes and Nina Morano Beltran were apprehended for the second time in January of 2022. FBI agents had flown nearly 9,000 miles to facilitate the extradition. The two women were returned to Texas in February of 2022. This time, there was no bond hearing. There was no house arrest. They were held in custody. Marisela's aunt, Denaisley Castillo, responded publicly to the news of their rearrest. She acknowledged the relief of the second capture, but directed her sharpest criticism at the 10-day gap between the ankle monitors being disabled and pretrial services noticing. She said the system had failed Marisela's family once already by releasing Lisa and Nina on bond. She said the second failure, allowing them a 10-day head start on an international flight, was unacceptable. Her frustration was shared by others who had followed the case. 2 women facing capital murder charges, released on $500,000 bonds, had successfully fled to Southeast Asia on flights booked in their own names before anyone noticed their monitors were gone. The procedural questions that raised about the pretrial monitoring system would remain unanswered in any public forum. What mattered to the Botello family at that point was that Lisa and Nina were back in Texas and that a trial date could now be set. The trial of Lisa Dykes commenced in December of 2023 in Criminal District Court 6 of the Frank Crowley Courts building in Dallas, Texas. Judge Nancy Mulder presided. The prosecution was led by Zach Brown of the Dallas County District Attorney's Office. Heath Harris represented the defense. The trial ran for 7 days. By the time the trial began, one significant development had already taken place. Charles Beltran had entered into a cooperation agreement with the District Attorney's Office. He would testify against Lisa Dykes. In exchange, the DEA's office agreed to dismiss the capital murder charge against him. He would still face a charge of tampering with human remains. On December 8, 2023, the 4th day of the trial, Chuck Beltran took the witness stand that he told the jury he had been in a sexual relationship with both Lisa and Nina. Lisa, from the witness stand, flatly denied this. Chuck testified that Lisa had made clear to him on more than one occasion that he was not to bring other women into the house. He said he had encountered Marisela that night through a chance meeting in Deep Ellum and had brought her back to the Mesquite address. The two of them had gone to his bedroom and fallen asleep. In the early morning hours of October 5th, he said, Lisa entered the room. Chuck testified that he woke to the sound of screaming. He said he saw Lisa on top of Marisela with a knife coming down. He said he pushed Lisa away. He said he heard Marisela fall. He said Lisa still had hold of her. In the moments before he fled, he testified Lisa told him she had warned him not to bring other women home. She said she did everything for him. She said he was disrespecting them both. He told the jury he left because he understood exactly how it would look. The blood was in his room. The woman had come home with him. He had a criminal record. Lisa and Nina had legal careers, financial resources, and attorneys. He told the court he believed he would be blamed that he left. He went to an ex-girlfriend's apartment complex. He got an oil change. He stayed away from the Mesquite house until Lisa contacted him and told him it was clear for him to return. When he came back, the room had been thoroughly cleaned. Under cross-examination by defense attorney Heath Harris, the contradictions in Chuck's account were pressed directly. Harris noted that Chuck had lied to investigators on multiple occasions in the early days of the investigation. He challenged Chuck on why, if he had merely witnessed the attack and had done nothing to cause it, he had not called 911. He asked why a man who claimed to be scared of being blamed had instead chosen to flee across the country rather than come forward. Chuck acknowledged the contradictions. He said he had been scared. He said he had made decisions he regretted. He did not retreat from the core of his account. On the same day, Chuck testified. The Dallas County District Attorney's Office filed motions to dismiss the capital murder charges against both Charles Beltran and Nina Morano in the interest of justice. The filing cited no additional explanation beyond that language. Both individuals still faced the tampering charge. Cell phone data corroborated the outline of Chuck's account of his own movements after leaving the house. His device placed him at an apartment complex consistent with his account of going to an ex-girlfriend's building. His account of returning to Mesquite after Lisa's call was also consistent with the available location data. The prosecution had built its case around one central argument. Chuck Beltran had not killed Marisela Botello Valadez. Lisa Dykes had, and the evidence, forensic and behavioral, pointed in one direction. The prosecution built its argument on three pillars: physical evidence, and a documented pattern of behavior in the days and weeks following Marisela's death. On motive. Prosecutor Zach Brown walked the jury through the full documented arc of Lisa Dykes' transformation after meeting Chuck Beltran. Photographs were presented showing Lisa before and after that relationship began. The contrast was striking enough that it required no additional commentary. Tattoos covering her arms and torso. Surgeries reshaping her face and legs. 60 pounds gone. Hair cut short and dyed color she had never worn before. A body rebuilt, Brown argued, entirely in service of one man's preferences. He then directed the jury's attention to a single detail that had been recovered from Lisa's phone during the investigation. The contact name she had saved for Charles Beltran was not Chuck. It was not his rap name. It was not a business label. It was the word lover. She had chosen that name herself and saved it. She had been carrying it in her pocket every day. Brown argued in closing that when Chuck brought Marisela home from a nightclub and put her to sleep in his bed, the obsession that had consumed Lisa Dykes' identity for years reached a breaking point. He told the jury the evidence did not require speculation about motive. The motive was documented, photographed, and saved under a contact name in her own phone, done on physical evidence. Prosecutors pointed to the confirmed DNA match, placing Marisela's blood in Chuck's bedroom carpet, the visible evidence of deliberate cleaning before investigators arrived, and the cell phone data placing Lisa and Nina in the Wilmer area on the morning of October 5th, the same wooded area south of Dallas where Marisela's remains would be recovered 5 months later at Lisa's. Explanation for that cell phone data was that she and Nina had driven to a FedEx distribution center in Hutchins early that morning to collect urgent legal documents related to one of Nina's cases in New York. When investigators checked, there were no documents at that location. No package was waiting. No record of any scheduled delivery could be produced. Lisa took the stand in her own defense. Her testimony was direct and consistent on every central point. She had never met Marisela Botello Valadez. She had not been in Chuck's bedroom that night. She had no romantic or sexual relationship with Chuck. Their arrangement was financial and professional. He was a rapper she had been investing in. Nothing more. She described Chuck as aggressive and controlling. She told the jury he had called her 99 times in a single night when she refused to give him money. She said the Santa Muerte shrine inside the Mesquite house belonged to him, not to her, and that she had no personal connection to it. Regarding the life-size skeleton figure that had been discovered by investigators inside the Pennsylvania property, Lisa testified it was a Halloween decoration wrapped in a religious garment that had belonged to a Mormon family member. When Jamie Scarpia, the Pennsylvania neighbor and realtor, took the stand and testified that she had personally witnessed Lisa and Nina kneeling before that figure inside the Pennsylvania house, Lisa told the jury she had no idea why Scarpia would say that. Defense attorney Heath Harris focused his argument on what the physical evidence could not establish. No forensic evidence directly placed Lisa as the person holding the knife. The unidentified blood profiles recovered from the carpet, one male, one female, neither matching any of the three defendants, raised the possibility, Harris argued, that other uncharged individuals had been present in that room. Harris also pressed the jury on Chuck's credibility. This was a man who had lied to investigators, a man who had fled the country, a man who had participated in the disposal of Marisela's body. And now, Harris argued. He was the prosecution's primary witness, delivering testimony that pointed exclusively at Lisa in exchange for a deal that kept him off a capital murder charge. Harris asked the jury to weigh that carefully. He also raised the legal argument of sudden passion, asking the jury to consider a reduced finding on the basis that even if Lisa had acted, she had done so in a state of extreme emotional disturbance. The jury rejected that framing entirely. On December 13, 2023, the jury returned to the courtroom. They had deliberated for 90 minutes. Guilty of murder as charged in the indictment. Guilty of tampering with physical evidence. 2 counts. No ambiguity. The lead prosecutor later noted to reporters that it was one of the fastest verdicts she had received in a felony case. The deliberation had concluded so quickly that court staff needed time to locate attorneys, family members, and gallery observers before the verdict could be formally read into the record. Lisa Dykes stood without visible expression as Judge Nancy Mulder read the verdict aloud. Her attorney Heath Harris stood beside her. She did not speak. The sentencing phase followed. Marisela's younger brother, Luis Botello Valadez, delivered the only victim impact statement on behalf of the family. Luis spoke about his sister. He described what she had meant to the people around her. He talked about the way she showed up for her family, the way she made people feel seen, and the specific texture of her absence. Not as an abstraction, but as something the family would encounter at every gathering, every holiday, every ordinary moment. She should have been part of that. He addressed Lisa Dykes directly. He told her that mercy, on behalf of himself and his parents, was not available. He said he hoped she understood in that prison cell what she had taken. The jury sentenced Lisa Dykes to life in prison for the murder of Marisela Botello Valadez. An additional 20 years were imposed for the tampering conviction. A fine of $10,000 was applied to each count. Before Lisa was removed from the courtroom, Judge Nancy Mulder addressed her directly from a bench. The judge told her she hoped Lisa would find, inside that prison, some measure of the dignity and self-worth she had spent years trying to construct around another person, dignity that had never required what she had done to Marisela Botello Valadez to obtain. The judge said, "May God have mercy on your soul." Lisa Dykes showed no reaction. Heath Harris subsequently filed a notice of appeal, stating that his client maintained her innocence and that she had received a fair trial. The appeal process was ongoing as of the time this script was produced. Denaisley Castillo, speaking to reporters outside the courthouse, said the verdict was the outcome the family had needed. She said it did not bring Marisela back. She said nothing would. In June of 2024, the remaining legal proceedings against Charles Beltran and Nina Morano reached their conclusions. Charles Beltran entered a guilty plea to the charge of tampering with human remains. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison. His attorney released a statement on his behalf in which Chuck expressed remorse for not contacting law enforcement on the night of Marisela's death and for the decisions he made in the days that followed. His attorney said Chuck had apologized directly to the Botello Valadez family in open court before sentencing. Nina Morano entered her own guilty plea to the same tampering charge the following week. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison. However, at the time of sentencing, she had already served approximately 771 days in custody, roughly 2 years since her original arrest in Miami in March of 2021. That time was credited against her sentence. Shortly after her plea, Nina Morano submitted a voluntary petition to revoke her own law license. The petition was granted. She had requested the revocation herself. The capital murder charges against both Chuck and Nina were dismissed and never reinstated. It is worth accounting for what those outcomes mean when placed against the full record of what both individuals admitted to. Chuck Beltran acknowledged being present in the room during Marisela's attack. He acknowledged leaving the house while she was still alive. He acknowledged participating in the transportation and disposal of her remains in a wooded area south of Dallas. He acknowledged fleeing across state lines and into another country. He acknowledged going along with the plan in the days following the murder. His testimony, the account he gave on that witness stand pointing directly at Lisa Dykes, was the instrument through which Lisa's conviction was secured. That testimony earned him a deal that removed a capital murder charge from his record. Nina Morano arrived in that room after the attack, according to the account established through the investigation. She assisted in the transportation of Marisela's body. She fled to Florida with Lisa. She disabled an ankle monitor on Christmas morning. She boarded a flight to Cambodia. She served no additional prison time beyond the time she had already spent in custody awaiting trial. Whether the outcomes for Chuck and Nina reflect the full weight of what happened in that house on October 5th, 2020, is not a question this script can answer. It is a question this case leaves open. What is documented is what each person admitted to, what each person received, and the gap between those two things. That gap is for you to sit with. Marisela Botello Valadez flew to Dallas on October 2nd, 2020. She was 23 years old. She had a return flight home on the morning of October 5th. She had a family waiting for her in Seattle. She had a brother who knew that if she did not call, something was wrong on the night of October 4th. She was locked out of a friend's apartment in a city she did not live in. She made a sensible call. She ordered a rideshare. She went somewhere she could be. She met someone who seemed harmless. She got into his car. She stopped at a convenience store, bought a drink, and smiled at the camera on her way out. She had no way of knowing what was inside the house she was heading toward. She had no warning, no signal, and no reason to suspect that two women she had never met, whose obsession with the man in that car had quietly consumed everything around them, were already there. There was nothing in that convenience store, nothing in that parking lot, nothing in that car that could have told her. Her seat at the gate the following morning sat empty. Her name was called over the intercom at Dallas Love Field and received no answer. Her family waited in Washington for a call that never came. 5 months later, a stranger found her remains in a field in Wilmer, Texas. 3 years after her death, a jury of 12 people deliberated for 90 minutes and decided that Lisa Dykes was responsible for ending her life. That verdict, and the sentences handed down to all three individuals who had been inside that house, is the closest thing to accountability that the justice system was able to deliver. Her brother Luis stood in that courtroom and told the court what she had meant to the people who loved her. Her aunt Denaisley Castillo stood outside that courthouse and told reporters what the family had lost. A name was read into a verdict. A sentence was imposed. None of it returns her. None of it fills the seat at the table, or answers the phone, or boards the flight home. Her name was Marisela Botello Valadez. She was 23 years old. She was a daughter and a sister, and she deserved every moment she was denied. Rest in peace, Marisela. If this case stayed with you, leave a comment below. What part of this story do you think justice missed? Chuck's deal? Nina's outcome? The 10 days no one noticed the monitors were gone? Your comments keep cases like Marisela's alive in the conversation.